Guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, I am so excited to finally post a great conversation that I had with Chris Reiter, who you may know as For Public Safety. Great channel. Now, in this video, we're going to break down a very interesting situation in Chris's own hometown involving claims of corruption, brutality, and auditing. Check it out.
Mind going by Josh or?
I am Josh. And Chris, it is a pleasure to be on your channel. I watched your really intense, riveting video about the search warrant being executed at the former sheriff's house. And I cannot wait to talk with you about it because that was some crazy stuff. I mean, sparks, smoke. Crazy, crazy, crazy.
On my channel, like the basics of my channel has started with basically investigating the corruption that is within the agency of which that former sheriff is now being investigated.
So you started very specifically there with Clay County?
It's Clark County. Long story short, my girlfriend and I were the victims of a botched police raid that was performed by them. So we had to file a lawsuit because there were major damages. My girlfriend actually got her back broken. So we had to do a lawsuit, and they were just covering records.
Were the two of you named plaintiffs in the same lawsuit?
Yes.
Did you share an attorney?
We don't have an attorney.
Oh, okay.
Too bad you don't live here.
Yeah, that's right. Are you in federal court or state court?
Federal court.
Okay, that's intense. Doing that without a lawyer. Okay.
Yeah, well, we didn't have much choice. There's so much corruption that even the lawyers that were involved in our case ended up being part of the corruption, which drove us even deeper into studying the corruption because, you know, there was going to be no resolution. We weren't going to make it to a federal case being filed if we didn't figure out what the heck, what's going on within the people in these agencies.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
so as we started peeling the pages back and looking deeper, we realized that there were several things going on with this agency. Meanwhile, we felt like it was necessary to do a report on what happened to us with the Department of Justice.
Okay.
So if you kind of take both of those elements and you squash them together, it ends up maybe leading to an investigation in which they find that there is, in fact, corruption.
Yeah. So a lawyer would say they have found probable cause that there might be corruption. Times where there's smoke, there's fire, right? But at this point, we would say that there's probable cause to believe that there's corruption. They obviously filed an affidavit. They presented an affidavit to a judge that allowed a basis for the execution of a warrant. So that's something there, but we don't know what it is. And we don't know who all it involves, do we?
Based on the events as they're taking place on the timeline, I can see what they're after. I feel like it would be wrong of me to try to publish that right now because one, I don't want to hinder the investigation. I might not have all the details yet either because they're not giving public information releases at this point. It was all the mainstream media could do just to squeeze a few potential charges out of them.
If you already know this, I'm sorry, but the way that arrest warrants work is a law enforcement officer using an attorney in the prosecutor's office or the attorney general's office or in the federal system, someone inside the Department of Justice, an assistant U.S. attorney, will take the affidavit to a judge, and it can be any judge that's qualified in the area. It's sworn testimony from the law enforcement officer saying, if you will let us search this person or search this place or pursue this information or this data that we don't otherwise have access to, we believe that we will find evidence of wrongdoing, and judges take those things very seriously. If there's first-person knowledge of probable cause, the judge is going to sign a warrant. That warrant doesn't start a case against a person. Like former Sheriff Noel, he may very well, in fact, you and I know that he probably is the target of this investigation, but he's not named as a party in the search warrant affidavit, but instead a place that he has control of and documents and records that he has custody of that they are going after. Now, when the officers are correct and there is something there, when they execute the warrant and they find either what they're looking for or something similar, then oftentimes there is an indictment. And it's only at the time that the indictment is unsealed, when a person appears and is arraigned, or sometimes shortly before that, any of us, guys like you and me, ever find out what were the statements in the arrest warrant. Until the indictment is out there in public, the investigation is secret. But as you know, because you were literally there when they were executing the warrant, not every investigation stays secret in every way forever, right?
Well, because as I understand it, there is no expectation of privacy in public. So
that is correct. Yeah.
The neighbors see things and it's public. So people are allowed to walk up. There's nothing illegal about taking your camera phone out and staying a distance back well enough that you're not getting involved in the way of their investigation and recording it. So I will say this. I have been given very dependable intel. There have been multiple raids or search warrants served with the involved parties of this agency for the last several days. There's been maybe in the neighborhood of 8 so far that I've heard of.
Others of those other individuals' private residences?
Correct. And businesses.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think the media, the mainstream already got the PIO release saying that all of Sheriff Knowles, or former Sheriff Knowles, businesses that he was operating in his own contracts with his own, with the county he was in charge of. So all those EMS and EMT services, those places also were served.
Yeah.
So from my understanding.
Yeah. And oftentimes in an investigation like this, especially if there's any reason for law enforcement to think that they're asking the judge for a little bit too much, they'll start small and they'll say, Judge, we want a search warrant for this tiny little thing. And then if they go and they do it and they get what they're looking for, then they have kind of some credit to say, we've got a big can of worms we're ready to open up here. We want you to let us at them. There's always a limit. They've got to be able to show probable cause to the judge. And it's not for nothing, because if the underlying affidavit is faulty, if there's not sufficient individual personal knowledge, and if there's not actually probable cause in it, if it's like a hunch, man, that can ruin the entire investigation. So law enforcement has to be very, very careful in how they do it. And that's why a lot of this stuff rolls out so slowly. And you're like sitting here on go, like ready to learn more. And man, it could be weeks, could even be months before you actually get the dirt that you want.
I know. It has me on the edge of my seat because I'm getting all these phone calls and all these addresses and all this mayhem that's happening in this area. And I'm dying to be there. And I want to publish what's happening. But until we get those releases, until it's gone through the legal process, we're not going to know. So I have a question from your attorney perspective here. How much do you think, I mean, they're not just going to allow cops to investigate, like you said, on a hunch.
That's right.
What are the requirements for police to, especially when they're doing it on their own police officer, they're going to do it perfect. What are the requirements for an agency to go to the judge with to be able to get this type of investigation going with all these search warrants?
Let's back it up a step and say, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but there are levels to the degree of sophistication and excellence inherent in various law enforcement agencies. Okay. And so down at the very bottom, you're going to have like small municipal police forces in terms of like the quality of their training, the quality of their practices, the quality of their supervision. Then above them, you have like sheriff's offices. They're the bigger budgets, usually a little more sophistication. Some of the people have been there longer. Then you have state police, right? And state police is, again, like it's kind of like the big leagues compared to those lower levels. Now, in the case with sheriff, they've got state police involved. And then I saw the headlines. They got an independent special prosecutor appointed to create some space between anyone inside of law enforcement who might want to know, wink, wink, what's going on in order to help a brother out. So they've set up an independent office. They've got them walled off so that they can conduct the rest of the investigation without any chance of people who are either defendants, future defendants, or friends of defendants getting any information that they don't want them to have. You probably already knew that already.
I did, but I love that you're telling this to, I'm sure I have viewers that are learning.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I learned too, like a lot of times you'll run across something that I didn't know. I haven't studied. So
yeah, these independent prosecutors, they are not accountable. They take them outside of the communications frameworks of the rest of the agency so that they really can operate independently. And especially when you're dealing with law enforcement corruption, which is the most dangerous, the seediest, it's like the most threatening to a free and democratic society, in my opinion, is when the government, which most of us experience the government as law enforcement, is dirty.
Right.
The whole system breaks down. So to answer your question, though, they're going to make sure that the person who's signing the affidavit for the judge is operating from personal knowledge, and that the judge doesn't have to make a mental leap to get to the conclusion that law enforcement would like them to go to. It's so varied. It's not a science. It's more of an art. Every situation is different, but most judges would say, look, I know probable cause when I see it. And that's hard. That's not much of a standard. They want to be able to see a logical step from A to B to C, not you can't get a warrant on something is fishy. That doesn't work.
So in other words, you're feeling like it's going to take quite a bit of evidentiary for a judge to say, okay, like they're not just an officer going saying, I got a hunch, Judge, that these guys are doing something. It would take a lot more than that, right?
Yeah. So in almost every movie and every TV show where something like this happens, a lot of it's like a super brilliant investigator who's like, believe me, I just know. And then the judge is like, okay, I'll sign the warrant.
Come on, man. What is this? And we have to accept that information, because if we want the investigation to continue and we want any forward progress in combating the local corruption here with this agency, we're just going to have to accept it for an answer, because, what are we going to do about it? If we don't, then it just makes a bigger mess out of a mess that's already there.
That's correct.
Right now, we're just going to sit back and let Scotty play hero and continue to watch as all of these raids or these search warrants are put out there. And I'm following the trail that they're leaving as they go, and I see what they're after, but I'm not going to be the one to publish it until after it's been, at least the investigation is concluded to a point where they're the ones that are ready to say, here's where we went and this is what we were after. And I cannot wait for my moment to give that to the public. I wanted to ask you about these. This is what the news has gathered from asking questions to the agency directly. I've got two questions for you. We'll start with this one. So there's allegations that were given towards the investigation, and they're not direct to Jamie. No, this is what they're saying. This is the investigation we're doing in general on everybody that they investigate. The first one is fraud. The second one is official misconduct. The third one is ghost employment. And the fourth one is tax evasion. And I would love to hear what you might think these things could mean in this type of situation.
Yeah. So can I start with ghost employment, which is something that's probably a little more unfamiliar to a lot of people?
And also, let me ask you this. Could it also be the same definition, I guess, legally, if they were to say, I've got somebody over here in this department? Like, for example, would this be a form of ghost employment? If I said, I have 7 people working in the jail on day shift, and in fact, maybe instead of the sheriff actually having 7 people at the jail, he might have 4 people at jail and 3 people working elsewhere. But on paper, he's alleging they're in the jail. So here they are. These are employees. That also potentially be
type of ghost employment also. Typically, ghost employment, just like the concept of it, is a fictitious person who literally doesn't exist. But if you look at the paperwork, if you look at all the records, they look like they're real. But to use jailers as an example, if you go into the jail, there's only 4 people there, and the other 3 are ghosts. Ghost employment is just a type of fraud. It's just a type of grift. It's just a type of official misconduct, but it really, like the name exactly, to me, explains what's actually happening.
And you might have just led into what their allegations were, because as you just put it, when you start with ghost employment, if you consider that potentially involved, then you can see how it would easily turn into obvious official misconduct. And it is a type of fraud. So that would explain the fraud avenue even. And then let's talk about the tax evasion.
If they successfully perform some grift and they're going to keep money for themselves, then they're not going to report that money to any taxing authority. And so they're evading taxes. The purpose is not to evade taxes. The purpose is to get that extra money, and they just can't turn it in. They can't report it.
They can't get caught.
That's right. That's right.
So this leads me to one more question here. So the state is investigating this particular matter. As I understand, the state does have a tax program, but also I usually, when I see things on the news about like tax evasion and tax fraud and stuff like that, I would think, well, that's going to be a federal investigation. Does it make sense for these allegations to be being investigated by the state instead of the feds?
It's not always an either or, but in a situation like this, which is really homegrown and which is really like kind of operating on a state level, the feds are going to stand back, let the state investigate all they want. It's really easy to prove tax evasion when it happens. I mean, once you have the facts in front of you, it's not rocket science for federal government to put together a coherent charge that's going to result in a conviction. And the state people are up to their ears in a bunch of scams coming out of this investigation. And so when they're done, they'll let the feds know what they found. And I would assume that there'll be some federal charges that go along with it.
I see. So even though this is just a state investigation, it will probably very well result in federal charges as well in the end.
Well, yeah, but you and I don't know it's a state investigation only. I mean, we know what we've seen, we know what we've heard, but there's almost always coordination between state and federal government when there's overlapping potential criminal charges.
And it would make sense to me that the feds would keep an eye on this as it goes, because, when you're using a state agency to investigate a former sheriff who was a former state officer as well, you're going to need to keep a good eye on.
Very much politically connected inside the local Republican Party.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do need to say this here. There are multiple social media posts, and everyone here already knows this former police officer that's being investigated. Well, we're assuming it's Jamie Knoll being investigated. He is very high up in the Republican Party, and he has several photographs hanging out with our governor, Mark Holcomb, and Mike Pence.
Yeah. Now, I know that's like fun and people love to talk about that, but like if I meet a famous person, I try to take a picture with them. It doesn't mean they know that, doing something illegal. Whether he gets charged off of it, we don't know. Whether he gets convicted, obviously, it's way far out there. But I do see a difference in the way that you think this started compared with Scotty. Man, my memory.
Scotty Maples.
Scotty Maples is saying, because you're saying you took some stuff to the Department of Justice, which I believe that you did. I have no reason to doubt that. And he's saying, well, I took my stuff to the state police. Now, It's really interesting. And I didn't want to leave the topic of Scotty Maples because, as you probably know, well, everyone knows this right now. If you literally watch any news on a national level, wide-ranging criminal investigations about law breaking or attempting to break the law organizations it's people working together to break the law. There are people who cooperate with law enforcement, and they can do so at any time, including at the beginning. And it is possible that you and I are going to find out that Scotty Maples is a cooperating witness with law enforcement. It's not mutually exclusive that the first thing that happened was you went to the Department of Justice and they started poking around, and those guys went to him and said, hey, we don't like what we think's going on here. Do you want to be in front of the train or on the train? And he's like, I'd like to get on the train. We just don't know. But he certainly is trying to paint himself as someone who's cooperating, because he's saying look, I took these records to them.
Yeah, it goes deeper than that. And I don't want to be the one to take my girlfriend and I, we did do a lot of reporting. We did find a lot of corruption, but we did not do it alone. There has been so many people on local level and even here on social media and on YouTube. This has been something that the public has been interested in trying to clean up for a long time. And even during the time where multiple people from different facets were all reporting stuff to the DOJ, and I know that for a fact, at that same time, big, huge issues were happening right underneath the federal investigators' noses while they were poking around. For example, I don't know if you saw this story, but there's this big elaborate, and the lawsuit, I believe, is very real, but what's elaborate is the way the sheriff's department painted how it happened, and it's straight from fantasy television. As a matter of fact, this agency is the ones who started the television show 60 Days In.
Yeah, and I saw some of that in some of the articles I read. I've never seen that show, so if you want to bring me up to speed on that, you can. Otherwise, I'll
give you the gist of a very important episode. There's an officer by the name of Herod who is the star of one of the seasons, and in his season, the very first thing that he did, for the television drama was he snuck snuck a key into the jail. That was his premise. Was the premise of the show is for undercover people to pretend they're just normal inmates.
Yeah.
And while they're on the inside, they're supposed to expose issues with both the staff of the jail as well as the other inmates. You know, how can they resolve issues and things like that? But it really ended up turning into more of, holy crap, look how bad people are being done in the jail and look how bad the jails are operating. So they ended up canceling the show because they didn't like the bad light it was painting on it. However, so Herod is Star Season 5. He brings this key into the jail. And now fast forward to real life. And last year, there was a corrections officer by the name of David Lowe. Well, this horrible thing potentially happened throughout the night that was really due to, I believe, the ghost employment issue, which is very, very, very short staffed. They were very short staffed.
And according to the lawsuit, they were giving access to the female side of the jail to males using this key.
Using a key?
Yeah.
A key.
Yeah, those are very, very serious allegations. And while there's a lot of immunity for people who work in law enforcement, man, sovereign immunity is not going to stretch far enough to cover people who let that happen if those allegations are true. And I should know because I represented someone who was abused by a jailer in another state, and we got a good recovery for her.
That's awesome. I love hearing when victims get some form of justice because it's still not enough. And that needs to be done. Any criminal that gets caught and makes a victim needs to suffer the consequences. That's the same officer that I have a personal bone to pick with because he beat me up while I was in handcuffs and broke my girlfriend's back and falsified information on records and all kinds of stuff. So I personally, I'll say this right here on this channel. I know he was a dirty cop, but I have a video of him doing the interrogation, which he called an interview on the corrections officer Lowe. And the way that interview was conducted was nothing more than a forced narrative. It was like Herod was saying, you should remember this. Here's what happened. And he would tell the facts like you went to this floor at this time, and then you went in the door in this door at this time, and then you moved left or right. He'll say all those things correctly, but then he says, and then you did this thing. And Mr. Lowe is like, that part, no, I didn't. And then Don would say, you did too. You need to tell me the truth. I'm telling you the truth. Now you need to tell me the truth back. So
yeah, I mean, that's a lot of interrogation techniques are like bullying, you know?
Yeah.
Some people are lying and they'll break, and some people are not lying and they'll change their story just of the stress of the situation, for sure. But I will tell you that the videoing of interrogation rooms is sunshine on law enforcement, and I love it. And to go back to something that you said very early in the video, videotaping people, recording people in public is totally legal, and recording your interactions with the police is legal. And if anyone can hear me say this, you should do it. You should record your interactions with law enforcement. You shouldn't disobey them. They're giving you a lawful order, but it's not a lawful order to tell you to stop recording. So everyone, keep recording. Say it with me. I will record. I will record. You got to record it, okay? Because there are dirty cops out there.
And without the recording, I'm sure you have people come to you that don't have proof all the time and make it so much easier. Would they have the recording?
Yes, without the recording, it's a he said, she said. No one's going to believe you. It doesn't work. I mean, you got to come in to hit too close to home, but you got to come in with broken bones if you don't have a recording. It's tough.
I can tell you this, if we didn't have the recording of what happened to us, there's no way we would even made it as far along to the lawsuit as we did. It took both broken bones and the recording. And that's why, guys, you have to record always. Now, let me ask you this, Josh, if this is a little off topic, but it's been ongoing debate for basically ever since I started my channel. My girlfriend and I, we record all of our legal endeavors unless it's inside the courtroom and, you know, it would be an interference of somebody's privacy. But we definitely, when we go and do like records requests, or if we're going to report misconduct on an officer or, you know, anything like that, we always bring our cameras along and we record that too, because we feel like you never know when somebody's going to do something that you're going to need that recording for. So my question is,
yeah, you never know. And also, if they know you're recording, they're less likely to do the illegal thing. And so it actually makes your life better.
That's right. That's how we feel. We feel like, but unfortunately, you'd be surprised if you watch my channel. It's almost as if the recording pushes them right into doing something wrong. A lot of times it's amazing. But my question is this, as an attorney, how would you feel about the law aspect of it when people say, I took my camera into the police department, into the lobby of the police department to fill out a complaint form and turn it into the clerk? Could that be illegal?
No.
Well, there you have it, folks. That should be the answer to the debate. I mean, an attorney, and very well-established attorney, I don't believe it's illegal either, or I wouldn't do it.
Now, a municipality can pass a law that criminalizes that behavior. But if you challenge the legality of that law, and if you don't run out of money, and you can get that up to the U.S. Supreme Court, I think they will agree with me that you have a First Amendment right to record. I mean, they've been pretty upfront about that recently. Pretty bold print. Black letter law is you can record in public. And what is more public than a building that is owned by the public? Now, it's not true if you go into a Walmart and you want to record. Walmart, that's private property. If Walmart tells you to shut the camera off, you got to shut the camera off. But you know who owns the public buildings in Clark County?
Us.
Yeah, we the people. The people of Clark County do.
And then, so I'm glad you broke that down, because a lot of people do get confused with private and public buildings, for example. I get this a lot too. This is a good question for you. And I know, once again, we're off topic from the sheriff, so I hope you don't mind. But I love running these types of things through the attorneys. Limited public forum and restricted. Can you tell us the difference between the three? We get so many people that go, it's the limited public forum doctrine. It means you can't go in with your camera.
Well, there are places that are like that, but they're very narrow. I mean, you know, a judge can say no cameras in the courtroom. And as you know, in the federal system, there are no cameras in any courtroom ever. In any federal court. Yeah. Yeah,
we're not allowed to bring camera in at all without it getting locked up in a bag at the federal courthouse where we're doing our case.
That's right. Guys, that is it for today. Let me know if you enjoyed watching my stream with Chris by commenting down below and hitting that subscribe button. It means a lot to me. It actually does. I know I had a lot of fun talking with Chris. Make sure you check out Chris's videos explaining his investigative journey on his channel for public safety. I will be back very soon, and I will see you then, I hope. Bye.